Good. It's been a busy hour with the governor speaking at one and the secretaries both speaking at one. I was on those calls as you were, so I'm just jumping over. So I apologize for those who are on the call with us who usually we like to start right on time. Eli, also from the SBA, was called into a quick meeting. He said it should last 15 to 20 minutes, so he'll be on at about 12:20. Of course, they're coming into the final hours before they announce a fourth phase stimulus for Congress. And so we were hoping to be able to announce that here today and have Eli on with us as long as time allowed to answer questions because there is so much in that $1 trillion package, not just for small businesses and not just for those who are unemployed and not just for states, but also cities and towns and others in need for health care and also distribution of vaccine. So there's a lot of money in that compromise measure, over one trillion, I think they're talking about right now. But alas, I think Eli's getting briefed on it. I think he's able to kind of start to look at some of the items that are in there that haven't quite been voted on yet, but he's becoming familiar with them. So he was called into a meeting at 2 o'clock. He'll jump on here at 2:20, and we'll pick his brain, see what he can share. But I'm guessing that this is not going to be finalized till tonight or tomorrow. In which case we would ask each of you to, if you're available, to be on next week because there's going to be a clamor for information in terms of how did PPP change and how much is in the next round, and if I qualified before and I haven't spent the money and I haven't asked for forgiveness, can I still qualify for another round? And how should I do that? Should I go to the same bank? Should I go to a different bank? Should I go to an economic development agency like Seed Corporation? What's being recommended, and then of course EIDL and all of the unemployment. We're being told it could be $300 or $400 retroactive back to the October, which would be big checks for a lot of people who are out of work, especially if they're on work share. So there's a lot to talk about. So anyway, we'll be around one of the days next week. I'm not sure if you will, but perhaps we can get the date and time out to you. And I'm thinking like a 2 o'clock on possibly Monday, Tuesday, or Wednesday, and then just sending it out. We have now over 1,000 people that have been on these calls over the last 37 weeks. So my sense is that if we put new information available, we'll get a good number of people. Are you all around next week?
Yep.
Yeah,
Yes.
great. That's excellent. So why don't we just start in? Eli will join us shortly, and then we've got a special guest who's going to join us as well. Interesting guest. So I'm Chris Cooney with the Metro South Chamber of Commerce. This is week 37 of these COVID relief and recovery calls. This call is being recorded and will be posted to our COVID resource page at metrosouthchamber.com. On there, you'll find that we've hosted over 85 calls since this all started, Zoom calls, and these networking meetings, these types of meetings, board meetings, exec board meetings, ambassador meetings, all kinds of workshops and panels. And of course, you three have been with us on many of those. And I can only imagine how many other calls you've been on. If we all counted those up, we'd be in the thousands, I bet. Anyway, we wanted to thank some of our partners who have promoted these week in and week out. The Avon Industrial Park Association, Bridgewater Business Association, the Brockton Area NAACP, Campello and Montello Business Associations, the Cape Verdean Association, Haitian United, East Bridgewater Business Association, Easton Chamber of Commerce, the Massachusetts Small Business Development Center Network, Norwell Chamber of Commerce, Pembroke Chamber, Randolph Chamber, the South Shore Women's Business Network, and the Stoughton Chamber of Commerce. If you have a question for any of the panelists, please post it down below. You can either put it in the Q&A or the chat. We'll be checking both. We appreciate you being back with us again this week. We do have the mayor with us. We have two folks from Massachusetts, Mass Office of Business Development today. We're happy to see both of you, Susan and Margaret. And Eli will join us from the United States Small Business Administration as well. We also have with us Bob Heildberg, who is the author of Relive Patriots History, who's just gonna, we figured this is the week before the holiday. We'll have a little bit of, a little bit of trivia, and he just wrote this book and released it last week. It's his second book on the Patriots. He's got, I think, another one planned. And, it's visually not, we'll get into that later, but it's visually not very interesting. But once you get into the facts, you can lose yourself for an hour. It's really amazing. And, I'm looking at all three of you. I think, I might be a little older than some of you, but Patriots have been on a roll, right, in our lifetime. And there's some great facts and figures and games that all of a sudden you read through the stats and you get into it a little more and a little more. And you're like, I remember that game, or I remember that. So anyway, why don't we start off with the mayor? Mayor, it's good to see you again. What a nice job you did on the snow removal. I know it's your first one. First snowstorm, and it seems to have gone very well. What do you think?
Yeah, let me just tell you, I'm about the same age as you, and I remember going to the Pats games with my dad when nobody was there, right? When it was Schaefer Stadium and Sullivan Stadium, and the fights in the stands were better than the product on the field. So, it's thank God it's turned around. So I'm interested to hear from the author, but yeah, I mean, we had a forecast. What we've always done, no matter if it's storm preparation or dealing with unrest in the city or COVID, is we plan for the worst and we hope for the best. And, we really had a good plan in place, and we pre-treated and salted and sanded. And, my mantra to DPW was, let's just get it right. This is the first storm, let's get it right. A little heavier than we thought. We thought it was going to be fluffy, but it was going to be up to 18 inches. We didn't get that, thank God. So you take the good with the bad. But, we got through that, and 98 houses at one point lost power. And by 2 o'clock yesterday, we were down to 3 houses. So it was all hands on deck, and we got it done. But let me just share the sobering news about COVID right now, because we've lost 4 more people since yesterday. We're at 332 loss of life in Brockton. We're at 7,747 total cases in Brockton. And our current positive cases of residents are 1,572 cases. So I was running a little late to get on this call because I was talking to the CEOs of the hospitals, Brockton, Signature, and Good Sam, and Sue Joss, and Neighborhood Health Center, and they're at near capacity right now. I haven't seen that since the spring. 63 inpatient, 11 in the ICU right now. So 35 reported new cases in a 24-hour span. So the red classification continues, but when we look at the metrics, all neighboring communities abutting Brockton are in red as well. So again, my rollback came into effect on Wednesday, phase 2, step 2, and we'll review it for 3 weeks. And I understand. I mean, I got a lot of calls, some nasty emails from folks that work out of gyms, and I understand that. But my job right now is to try to control the surge. The vaccine is coming. It's already at Good Sam. It's already at Brockton, but it's not going to come to Brockton, the city, until probably April, May. That's when we'll do mass distribution. So one thing that I did, and I invite Chris on the next one, the regional task force call with all the neighboring communities. I expanded that to a Plymouth County summit that I did on Wednesday. 17 communities got on the call with me, and we shared best practices and barriers and success stories, and we'll continue to do that. It was really worthwhile. So had a wonderful call this morning with a hedge fund company that's really interested in investing in the city of Brockton. And I welcome that. And we're going to get past COVID. We all know that. And I can't believe it's been 37 weeks that Susan and Margaret and Eli and Chris and you and I have been on this, but we're not there yet. But when we are there, Brockton is going to be poised for some major development that's ongoing and future development. But I'm more concerned about the mom and pop businesses now that are hurting. So I've made a plea to the state and federal partners to come up with some more money. We need to take care of our businesses, and the additional round of the CDBG, we've already picked through the BRA, Robert Jenkins, we've already picked the people that are going to be qualified and going to get that money. So, I'm here to listen and learn. To be a good leader, you have to be a good listener. But right now we're still in a deep red, and we need to kind of not take our foot off the gas right now. I know the vaccine's coming, but it's not here yet. So that's kind of the update right now, Chris.
Great, thanks, Mayor. Just talking about the regional meetings you've had, both with the surrounding towns in Metro South, but also with the Plymouth County, are the agendas similar or are they different?
Yeah, I mean, for the county, again, the agendas, yeah, they're similar in scope, right? We're talking about what's going on with COVID in your respective municipality, how are you helping businesses, what's the pushback? There is a lot of pushback right now People don't necessarily believe in the vaccine. At least some people don't. So it's a marketing. We have to educate and inform. And so again, I was really happy to spearhead that with the county, and we had Plymouth on, and we had everybody pretty much on. So the next regional one I have with the direct towns plus Bridgewater and Randolph, I would love to have you on, Chris, to talk about business. And at the end of the day, we're all in this together. I keep saying it. So what's good for Brockton is good for Hingham and Situate and Halifax and Plimpton, and vice versa. So we just got to keep our efforts to collaborate and work together.
So we had the county treasurer on our board meeting agenda Wednesday, and he shared some of the best practices that were happening around the $90 million that came in from the CARES Act. And he talked about one town redoing an old town hall to secure a polling place. He talked about another town purchasing an ambulance just dedicated to COVID transport, so that it didn't infect and take the other one offline. They only had another one, so they would have taken the ambulance out of the town if they didn't buy the extra one. He also mentioned the Shaw Center, how the Shaw Center was able to maybe access some funds for renovations for testing site, but those renovations obviously will still be valuable after this is all over. Can you talk a little bit about that and some of the best practices that
yeah, no, absolutely. And Tom O'Brien, the treasurer, has been really a great partner. So we're in line to get the full 18 million. We've already gotten 8. We are owed an additional 6 that we've already submitted our reimbursement expenses, and then plus 4 will be owed to us. And again, the feds and the treasury have allowed municipalities to extend to do the paperwork after December 31st, but we still have to incur the expense. So the Shaw Center is a unique situation because we know we have to spend about $5 million to get that up to speed. But I was asking if we could think outside the box and in essence, get some subsidy, right, from the feds through the CARES Act. But there has to be a legitimate reason under COVID-19. And this is because the Neighborhood Health Center has just done an unbelievable job testing. And we knew outside at Brockton High, it was great in the warm months, but in the cold months, no way. So months ago, I worked with our CFO, and we've already had a lot of work done there. We've submitted a bill for $750,000 that we'll get reimbursed on. And then the additional money, we already have the operations to get the appropriation from a bond. If you're a municipality and you borrow right now, the interest rates have never been so low. So the good thing about Neighborhood Health Center is they're relocated already. They shifted from Brockton High. They're at the Shaw Center, but we're in 2 trailers that we rented. Again, reimbursed under CARES Act, and we'll get every penny on the dollar for that. And then once the building is ready, we're going to move them in, and we're going to continue the testing inside. So it really has been a really good working relationship with the county. And again, $18 million is a lot of money, and it's really helping and making a difference.
Is there a sense of when the Shaw Center might be available after this is all over for functions and whatnot?
We're not there yet, Chris, to be honest with you, because our view was let's ramp it up, let's get it, not a Band-Aid approach, but let's get it in the ability to have the testing done inside. But it's not going to have all the bells and whistles that we want to be a showpiece for when we do rent it out again. And I don't know, quite honestly, how long the testing is going to be, how long this is going to continue. But I do know, and I said this on January 6th when I took the office, that will be up and running as long as I'm the mayor of Brockton. So we just have to figure out, where we will be come 2021, and we'll invest some money and we'll bond it out and we'll get it to be the way that it should be.
That's great, Mayor. It's really great progress. I also want to commend you for, people don't realize there's 18,000 kids in the school district here in Brockton, bigger than almost every surrounding town, population-wise. And you were able to get them through this grant, $8 million in computers. So every child now has a computer in the city of Brockton. Just extraordinary achievement.
Yeah, I literally just did an interview this morning with the Washington Post, and the reporter, Dustin Waters, was not aware that Brockton High is the largest public high school east of the Mississippi. 4,200 kids. When I was there was 5,200 kids. So we're now a 1-to-1 school district, which not being a wealthy community, we never thought we would be. And I would never try to minimize COVID and say there's a silver lining, but there's a benefit from the CARES Act, and $8 million is a true benefit.
Great. Thank you, Mayor, so much. So we're fortunate to have Susan and Margaret with us today. Again, I was just talking about the fact that we had the governor speaking at 1 o'clock, announced at 11, I think. So you had to kind of scramble. I don't know if you guys split up. And then both secretaries of labor and economic development were on also at 1 o'clock. I tried to listen to both, but it was, I pretty much stayed with the secretaries because I figured I could catch up with you after. But Susan, why don't we start with you? What's happening? I know the Secretary of Labor got into a lot of details about unemployment benefits,
Mhm.
that the schedule of the rates for unemployment insurance for all employers in the state of Massachusetts. She got into a lot of that today. What can you tell us?
She did. She started initially speaking about the recent release for the unemployment numbers, and that the Massachusetts numbers are down from October. Currently, we're at 6.7%, which compared to the rest of the United States puts us roughly in the middle of the pack of the country. We added 12,200 jobs last month, and jobs were added in every sector, with the exception of government jobs. And currently, we've got 3.6 million people in our labor workforce, with 240,000 unemployed. So, still lots of work to be done to get people back to work, but the trend is down, so that's a good thing.
She gave us that year over year figure. I don't know if you're going to mention that. The
The
338,000 jobs lost from this month last year to now.
Yeah, and that was over all the sectors.
Yeah.
And I think there was a labor force decrease in 44,000 people. I think
Right.
those are the
That's right.
numbers that she gave. Yeah. Um,
Since October.
yeah.
And they think that's a lot of working parents who are home with their kids and such, and in the industries that are most affected, like the restaurants. And
Yeah.
sorry, I didn't mean to break your. I just.
No worries at all. There was a lot. She pumped a lot of information. She was speaking fast and furiously. I was trying to take copious notes. And then what I think is really important to employers, and I think a lot of employers were really concerned about this, and rightly so, that today the governor is filing a bill to provide relief to unemployment rates to employers. So they're looking at 1.3 billion to provide relief over the next 2 years, because currently we're positioned to go from a Schedule E to a Schedule G, which would result in a 60% increase rate to employers for
Yes.
their unemployment insurance rate.
So per employee, almost $300 per employee in increased taxes. If not for what he proposed today, which was right to
Right,
bond the debt over 2 years and go up incrementally. So the increase
right.
will only be less than $100 per employee.
Yeah, so it's still going to increase, but even with the bill, it's still going to increase. So the numbers that she provided were 500, and if with nothing done, with no bill, the increase would be from 539 to 866 if we do nothing. And then rates would go up with the bill from 539 to 635 in 2020, and then from 635 to 665 in 2021. So, I think she's going to try to get some information out to us so that we can then get out to you so that we can start advocating for this bill to be passed, so that, we can ensure that this legislation gets accomplished, because we obviously want to do what we can to help businesses, because it's still going to be an increase and an impact. 539 to 635 isn't chump change, but it's certainly a heck of a lot better than 539 to 866. So we want to ensure that we're doing everything we can to support this. And then she talked about, securing it with a bond, because the bond rates are better, and kind of looking at ways to go about doing this. But, it's not pretty, but it's prettier than it could be. So.
Well, we're fortunate to have a governor who was in the finance head of A&F in the administration. He gets the state budget like nobody else, and he thinks of things like this. So the feds are offering to let the states borrow the money to bond, but it's at a higher rate than he can get on the market. So the governor decided, let's put this out on the market and save a point or two or three and pass the savings on to the employers so that the increase isn't so great. You don't see that in a lot of states, I'm sure. You kind of just go with the default, but it's really a credit to this administration, I think, to be innovative and figure out how you can deal with negative numbers like this in the most positive way possible. So yeah, it was. So that was his press conference today at 1 o'clock, and how he's looking for the legislature to approve that bond. So
Yeah. So those were the two updates from the Labor and Workforce Secretary.
great. Thank you so much, Susan. I really appreciate it.
You're welcome.
Margaret, you're up next, and I know you and I have been talking with several entities, and I have a couple more leads to pass on to both of you, but it's really around economic development incentives and Gateway City stuff. So how you doing? And did you guys split up and you covered the governor, or how did that work?
Well, no, we both had to be on. Our attendance gets counted on Secretary Keneally's call. So we were both there and figured if anything was earth shattering, it was going to get said on that call as well. So
Okay.
when those two align, yeah, they're counting our attendance. But else back, I really should, and with the mayor on the line, say, Chris, that to your credit, we do a lot of work offline. We do appreciate how exclusive you are, Stu and I, each week. And I just made a comment to someone what a gold standard star that you set in Brockton about working together at all levels of government, right? So for you, the chamber, the mayor's office, myself and Sue, and how we're able to bring the incentives. I mean, we clearly said, you hear the mayor out all the time saying, want to spend money, spend it in Brockton. It's a good investment. It's federally recognized as that top 1%. So bringing the different resources together are invaluable. And you as a partner, honestly, have been a pleasure for Sue and I to work with. I wish I had more good news to bring from Secretary Keneally's call. I think we have, I know we've slowed down things a little bit here. We heard the rollback. We heard particular, Brockton's need with the mayor opting to have additional restrictions in kind of this holding pattern of getting through the holidays as far as where the businesses are. We know that doesn't give vacation to the stress level that the businesses are hearing. The budget that did just passed has some funding in there, and as everything gets rolled out, we'll be releasing those resources and communicating information as soon as we have it. But they were very cognizant of, moving from reopening, where Stu and I have spent the bulk of our year, into recovery, and then the resources around that specifically for small businesses. So stay tuned. As soon as those are ready, we're here for you, and we are going to make sure that Brockton has good access, and obviously has access to Sue and I to answer any questions. And the other piece that, is the technical assistance provider funding, being released, or some of our CDFIs, who I know you've had on these calls with us before, in that slated for some funding. And then the other was the Alert MA. I don't know if people got that on their phone, like alert, storm watch.
I have it. Yep.
And it's really good communication. So you're able to get direct information from the Commonwealth. And I'll put the link in the chat for that for any residents that want to sign up. But the hot topic of this week, of course, is the vaccine. And the town manager of Norwood, I got to give Tony Mizuko a shout out, because the Moderna vaccine is actually Cambridge gets all the love, but it's manufactured in Norwood. And so much of the talk has been about the vaccine. So there is the release for the state's plan is posted online. There is FAQs about the state's plan for the vaccine, anyone that wants to dive into that. And then on these Alert MA website you can put in, they're also going to be providing updates around that to you. So I think that's a really good source of information. It sometimes pings you on things like, hey, governor's going to give an important announcement, tune in to info on vaccines or Stormwatch. So I think being connected is so important, and your members do a great job by tuning into these calls and reaching out. So I'll put that in the chat, but that's all I have this week, and we're glad to join you next week, and are anxiously awaiting any federal resources, as obviously everything at the state has been so oversubscribed. We're doing our part, and I think the Baker-Polito administration has been very creative in where we've been able to get funds out and do it with what we have, and push it out to small business. We know small business is the engine that drives the Massachusetts economy.
Thank you, Margaret. And can I ask all of our panelists to put your contact information down in the chat area? Someone was just asking for you, Susan. They wanted to reach out to you directly. But Margaret was talking about this alerts MA, so I can't really see that on my phone. But all you do is you text, and Margaret's putting it down below. You just text your number, your cell phone number, and you will receive direct alerts from the governor's office when he is having a press conference or when something is changing or developing. I'd say it's maybe, well, this week it was every day, but most weeks it's one week. You can tell things are heating up, but you usually get one alert a week or every other week, depending on what's happening. If a level has changed or there's resources available that weren't available before, or if there's going to be a press conference, they will send you out a pre-notice to let you know when that's happening, and then they have a link to their COVID Live link, which puts you right into their press conference. So it's very, very helpful. I've found just to remind me. It does provide some stress sometimes, like today, because I'm like, all right, that's exactly the same time as another meeting. But obviously they covered, I think, all of the topics and all of the meetings, so that was fine. Um, Thank you, Margaret, and thanks for being a great partner, and both of you for being available to respond to leads. There's quite a few projects in the pipeline in Brockton right now, and there's a few more on the way as things develop. So thanks for being available to answer people's questions about incentives, not just in Brockton, but the entire region. You both serve the entire region of Massachusetts, which is right around Brockton and the Metro South region, and of course you're both from this region, so we appreciate that familiarity with the communities. So wanted to now move on to Eli. Eli, I know you had a special meeting at 2 o'clock. We're kind of excited to hear about what's happening next in terms of the stimulus. You're smiling, so I'm hoping you have some good news. I think we all think something's going to happen, right? And we all just talked about if it doesn't happen today, then we're going to try to be available for a call like this on Monday, Tuesday, or Wednesday of next week at 2 o'clock to really bring local businesses up to speed. We've now had over 1,000 people on these calls in the 37 weeks that we've been doing these. And so we will send out a special notice letting them know that the stimulus has been approved and that we have new information. So we hope that you might be able to join us. But in the meantime, how you doing and what's new?
All is well, except the fact that we only have, about 7 hours of funding to keep the government, open. So, but the 2 o'clock call was, was with regards to what would happen were there to be a government shutdown, and what should we all do? I mean, no one's anticipating that. So, to your point, and just for for everyone on the call, everyone is anticipating a bill to be passed today. The various versions of it that we've seen contain both PPP, additional PPP assistance for small businesses. So there's the grants through the PPP program. There's going to be some clarity with regards to borrowers who received both idle advances and PPP loans. So we're hoping for that. Obviously, any shortfalls that were not addressed during the CARES Act or unintended consequences from the CARES Act, as far as tax liabilities or taxation that such as the debt relief payments. Those are anticipated to be addressed through this next stimulus package. So we're optimistic. We're thinking something's going to happen today, and we're going to show up to work on Monday. But chances are, right, like anything else, that anything's possible, and we should be prepared for the best case scenario and worst case scenario.
Do you anticipate they'll?
But like you said,
Okay.
yeah,
I was
like
gonna
you
say,
said, there's, yeah, go ahead.
No, go
Chris.
ahead. I was just gonna say, do you anticipate tweaks to the PPP or major changes?
So borrowers who received a PPP loan in the past would be eligible, right? What they're trying to hammer out at this point is whether, there has to be a tangible decrease in sales, right, in any of the quarters during FY20 as compared to FY19, and what the number should be, right? So I've seen 30%, I've seen all sorts of numbers being thrown out there, but I think the 30% decrease is one of the numbers which has reached, um, the latest document that they're trying to negotiate at this point. So again, premature for us to talk about all those details because it could change, and it very well will change.
Yeah.
But I have a feeling something's going to happen today. I just don't see. I don't see this Congress. I don't think Senate wants the government to be shut down, and because funding for the stimulus packet and government funding are so closely tied together as far as the timeline goes. I think something's going to happen, and it's going to happen today, and we're all going to know about it. But most likely, it's going to be after business hours. It's probably going to make the late night news, and we're going to hear all the details, in the aftermath, right? But a couple of things I did want to mention. I have brought up the EIDL loan, which is still available through the SBA. The emergency, we just went back and forth with the Office of Disaster Assistance because I provided the deadline, in the last call here last week. So the emergency in Massachusetts ends on December 31st. So we still have a couple of weeks, right? Or close to it. Now, for folks who have not applied for an EIDL, loan to still apply. So the loans don't have to be approved by the 31st, as long as small businesses have put in the application by the 31st. Then the processing could take 3 weeks or 4 weeks, whatever it takes. If it does get approved after the emergency declaration has ended, that's not an issue, right? As long as the application is in by December 31st, that is the most important part. And I do, I like I said, I think folks who did not apply for whatever reason, or who applied for, both the EIDL grant and the EIDL loan, but decided not to take the loan, and if more than 6 months have passed, they can, reapply, right? If they're within the 6-month window, then they should request a reconsideration, not a new application.
So last week we talked about the taxability of PPP, and we had the Senate Ways and Means Chair, Michael Rodrigues, on, and he said that the state was following the federal lead and making it not subject to income tax for PPP forgivable loans. Can you go over that a little bit again on the
Yes,
federal side?
absolutely.
Can you depreciate items that you purchased? And okay.
Yeah, so Massachusetts is one of the the many states, and I think nationwide it's half and a half how the states follow federal guidelines as far as taxation goes. So IRS's guidelines. So we're fortunate here in Massachusetts. Again, the PPP forgiven amount is not going to be a taxable event for both federal and state taxes here in Massachusetts. Other states will differ on the state level. Okay, but on the federal level, all PPP forgiven amount are not a taxable event. Okay, the EIDL advances follow the same rules. So they're part of the same CARES Act. So the EIDL advance is not a taxable event. Now, I've said it many times, and I just want to make the point again that the EIDL advance, if taken with a PPP loan, has to be paid back. Okay, so a borrower who received $100,000, let's say, PPP loan, and they got a $10,000 advance because they have 10 employees or more. The advance was $1,000 per employee up to $10,000. Instead of getting the full $100,000 PPP loan forgiven, they're going to get $90,000. So the $10,000 advance will be deducted. Okay, and it's just the way that the guidance is written under the CARES Act. It's considered a duplication of benefits. And again, this next stimulus packet could very well untangle the two. Okay, and we're hoping for it. You know, this was definitely a priority for the Senate in particular. So, you know, we're hoping that that's going to happen. But as it stands, right, that idle advance will need to be deducted from the PPP loan amount. But if taken, you know, on its own without a PPP, it is fully forgiven and does not, you know, does not need to be included as taxable income. Here in Massachusetts on both levels, federal and state. Now,
Okay.
we did have another program as a result of the CARES Act, which was called the debt relief, the SBA debt relief that I've mentioned here on the program many times. So that program, because it was not addressed under the CARES Act, that is a taxable event to the small business owners. So what I mean by it, those 6 months of principal and interest that were received over the summer, or for some borrowers, you know, if they were on deferment, they probably just receiving those payments. They are going to be reported on a 1099 miscellaneous income statement by the lender of record. So for 7A loans, those 1099 forms get sent out by the lender who services the loan. For 504s, they do get sent out by the SBA. For microloans, it would be the micro lender of record. So that, you know, we know for a fact, as it stands right now, that is a taxable program, right? So the debt relief program. Now, going back to the PPP and your question, the IRS came out with a publication, right? A memorandum with regards to expenses claimed under the PPP loan program for forgiveness. So it's not an SBA thing. It's not a Congress thing. It was not addressed clearly, or properly addressed, I should say, under the CARES Act. So the IRS came out with this, you know, publication saying that borrowers who claim payroll expenses, mortgage interest, you know, rent, business rent, and utilities for their PPP forgiven amount, and you know, those are the eligible expenses that borrowers
Right.
can claim. So it's 10 weeks worth of it, right? 10 weeks worth of expenses. If those expenses were claimed and forgiven under the PPP program, borrowers, those small businesses, cannot include those expenses with their 2020
So they can't
taxes, right? So,
depreciate it or
you know,
take as a deduction. Okay.
exactly. So you cannot claim it as a business expense, because in fact they were not a business expense because they were forgiven.
Interesting.
So this is all from the IRS, and it makes logical sense, but obviously, you know, it's not what many small businesses wanted to hear, especially in a year like this one.
So we were all encouraging folks to take the PPP, and many did. Some have not expended any of those funds yet. What situation are they in? If they're sitting on $50,000 or $100,000 in a bank account, and they haven't spent it because they're not sure that they haven't needed it really, but they might need it. Are they subjected to tax on that, or?
So again, the PPP, right,
Yeah.
is not a taxable event by itself.
Okay. Regardless. Okay.
The issue with those borrowers who have not spent any PPP dollars yet, okay, is that the covered period, right, under which a borrower can use, you know, the funds and ask for forgiveness, is coming to an end.
Okay.
So borrowers had up to 24 weeks, right, of a covered period under which to spend the funds, you know, granted under the PPP program. And that covered period cannot exceed December 31st of 2020.
So if they're putting it off, they should pull that application for forgivability and start going through what they've spent, even if they haven't
Absolutely.
spent it out of that pool of money. Because some of them just put it in a separate bank account because they're fear of audit or whatnot. But they should start to pick through their receipts over the last, or their
That is
expenses,
correct.
and see what. Yeah, okay.
That is correct, Chris. And the other thing too worth mentioning, since we're on the subject, the PPP loans are deferred for a full 10 months after the end of the covered period.
Okay.
So technically for a borrower that has not asked for forgiveness, and this is important to mention, because I'm sure there are small businesses out there, as you mentioned, who have, not given forgiveness much thought.
Yeah.
There is no real hurry, because the loans will be deferred for a total of almost 16 months, right?
Yeah.
24
Okay.
week covered period plus 10 months on top of it.
Right.
So
So it's pretty cheap
this
money.
it is, no doubt about it, right? Even if you don't think you're going to get it forgiven, right? It's a 1% loan,
Yeah.
right? And I think is one of the many benefits of the program, because I'm sure, and I have heard from business owners who, they shut their doors in March and they've never reopened, so they haven't spent, a dime in payroll costs and other eligible expenses. Yet again, they had access to these funds, which they would not have been otherwise eligible, were it not for the PPP. And again, it's pretty inexpensive, you know, cost of funding, and I'm sure, I hope a lot of your small businesses were able to put that money to good use, and
Yeah.
try to stay open, and try to rebound a little. But we all know it. Much more is needed, and we're hopeful that this next stimulus packet is going to include, the full $300 billion they're discussing. So.
Yeah. That's great. Great news. Thank you, Eli, for the update. There is a question down below. I don't know if you can just take a look at that to clarify one of the points that you had made. Um, Actually, there's two questions down there. One from Jessica and another one from.
So on the idle loan, right?
Yeah.
On the idle loan, if a application or an applicant either got declined, or, for whatever reason, right? Or they denied, right, the loan component. So they declined the loan component. They only got the grant and they did not accept the loan. And 6 months have passed, 6 months or more. You cannot ask for a reconsideration. You have to put in a whole new application. And you only have until December 31st to do so under the COVID-19 emergency declaration.
Okay.
So the idle program, it's not going to be available on January 1st.
Okay.
No matter what Congress does with the stimulus bill, this is a presidential declaration. So unless the president declares COVID, an emergency again, and puts out another declaration, then there's no extension to the deadline.
So there's a question in there about forgiveness and their lender not taking the applications yet. My understanding is you can go right to SBA Direct and pull the application, but then fill it out and go through your lender, or?
Yeah. So on PPP loans, unfortunately, you cannot apply for forgiveness directly to the SBA. So,
Okay.
Chris, this loans are technically private loans, right? Which were granted by the many PPP participants,
Okay.
right? And it was truly the best, public and private partnership of all times. $525 billion of private money
Yeah.
was lent through the PPP loan program. Not a dime was printed by the Treasury, right? And we have to remember that the CARES Act was a large stimulus packet. I mean, $2.2 trillion. More than a quarter of it was from our lending partners, and these were funds that were in their balance sheets. There was no need for the Treasury to print new currency, right? It did not have any implications, long-term implications, to
Yep.
the monetary supply and funds in circulation, right? So there was no effect in inflation, for that matter. So it really was a great program. And as I've said it many times, I mean, we are grateful to the many lending partners here in Massachusetts that participated in the program, made this available to small business owners. But until the SBA pays on that forgiven portion of the PPP loan, it is a private loan, and that's why it needs to go through that lender of record.
Okay. So we'll let her know that they should go back to that lender and ask them for the forgiveness process to begin.
Most lenders that I know are accepting,
Yeah.
forgiveness applications. I'm sure, there are some who are staging how the applications are being accepted. So that could very well be the case there. But, I'm going to put in my contact information, and I'll ask, the participant to reach out to me directly. Maybe I can help. I can reach out to the lender on their behalf.
That's terrific, Eli. Thanks so much for being with us today, and hopefully you'll be available a day next week so that we can give an update on whatever is announced, hopefully tonight or tomorrow, about the
Absolutely,
extension.
Chris.
All right, thanks so much. Appreciate it.
Thank
And
you.
now we have kind of a special surprise for our folks. It is the week before the holidays, and we are delighted to have with us author Bob Haldberg, who has written his second book. This one is entitled Relive Patriots History, Six-Time World Champions. Bob, as I opened the book initially, and I was like, wait a minute, there's no pictures. And, there's literally not an illustration, not a picture. It's written word. And it's not like a story, it's stats. It's heavy, heavy duty stats. But I found myself, I looked in it and I looked up and an hour had gone by because I was reliving like different games I had watched. And of course, you're picking up on the highlights of a lot of these Patriots games. Back as the mayor describes, when I was working for the chamber in Fall River, and we had a speaker come, and he talked about how on his way he stopped off at the mall and he put 2 tickets to the Patriots game for Sunday. This was a Friday. He was speaking to the chamber. He put them on his windshield, and when he got back, there were 2 more. He put free on them, and there were 2 more added when he got back, and no one had taken them because no one wanted to go to the Patriots because they were losing just continually until, as you say in your book, I mean, the stats really added up, things turned around. But, before we get into this, I want to ask you, Doug Flutie's a favorite, right? He's a Massachusetts son, and he has so much of a history. And he appears in here on his one of the first passes, right, of a game, and he landed an 80-yard touchdown pass. He's also in here a couple times.
Yes.
Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, so the idea of putting all these stats together is just to create a conversation. So, like you said, you remember Doug Flutie, but you remember Doug Flutie for his drop kick, against the Dolphins, and what is he doing? Even the announcers didn't even know what he was doing, and then he puts it through. But so I wanted to come up with a lot of unique situations that people forget about. And you mentioned, the Patriots didn't even have that, the first play of the game. So I have the first play of the game and the last play of the game, memorable things like that. There was one game against the Chicago Bears where Doug Flutie just went back and threw it, and Irving Fryer caught it and ran for an 80-yard touchdown. So there's only been like 5 touchdowns on the first play of the game, and Doug Flutie was one of them. And so, it's a lot of just quirky little things like that you look at and say, geez, I remember that guy, or I remember that play, or remember that moment. And that's kind of what I wanted to do, is to bring all that stuff alive and then have people reminisce about it.
So we had our annual meeting speaker who talked about being 5'8" and wanting to desperately be a NBA basketball player, and how he was disappointed, and he went on to running instead. And I noticed one of your sections as the shortest players in that were ever hired and employed by the New England Patriots. And there's 22 of them under the height of 5'8". So there's hope for many of us who are challenged, right? And but Doug Flutie's not in that list. I think a lot of us think of Doug Flutie being 5'8" or so. How tall is he?
He was probably 5'9". He probably just missed
5'9", so he didn't make the list.
Yeah.
So
he
there's
probably wanted that extra inch or two, to make himself bigger. But
yeah.
so
a lot of the guys in here, they're 5'8", but they're big guys. They're all the defensive line, and
defensive backs and cornerbacks.
Yeah, very effective. Yeah, I found that interesting. And then we looked at the longest field goal. Do you know what that is, and who kicked it?
The longest field goal was probably Gostkowski. He kicked it when 67 or 60, something like that. And I think he did it in New Mexico City.
Yeah, okay. And this one is kicked 55-yard field goal in a victory over Miami. It's
Greg Davis?
no, but what is? Let's see, Mark Barr. That's 55
That
55-yard
far,
field
that
goal.
far. Okay, that was probably the longest field goal that he kicked. You know, I have all the longest field goal kicks of every kicker.
Okay.
The
Wow.
longest punt. So
So what made you? Why did they call you the Stat Man, and how did you get that nickname, and how did this
I mean, it
become a
really
passion?
started with Steve Grogan. I mean, guys would do autograph shows, and I'd be in line waiting, and then people are like, I don't know who he is, but I want his autograph. And it, got me curious to say, there's people in line that want his autograph because he played football, but they have no idea who he was. So I had a chance to meet Steve Grogan numerous times, and I asked him different questions of who he threw touchdown passes to, and he said, I have no idea. I mean, I threw so many. I said, well, the next time you do something, I'm going to have it all down. And so I have all his 182 touchdown passes of who he threw, what game, what's the score was, and where the game was, and all of his 35 touchdown runs in his career. So the next time he had it, and I made a bunch of copies and passed them out, and then he got the word out. So when guys would come in town, like a Russ Francis or a Raymond Claiborne or a Mike Haynes that come out of town, I would have all their stats, and they were just loving it because, now these people could, this is before the internet was out there, that they could look it up. So it just started from there, and then eventually we tried to get Gino Cappelletti into the Hall of Fame, and then I worked together with the Patriots to get Andre Tippett inducted into the Hall of Fame. So all of those combinations of stats actually led to Andre Tippett getting into the Pro Football Hall of Fame, and then a book about a year later is when my first book came out.
So we watched Andre Tippett, and he seemed like a great player, but you actually knew the numbers, which he was able to use to have the judges take a look at it. And
Yeah, I mean, so Ron Borges was the presenter, and he would present the same thing year after year. He did this, he did this. So there was a couple of us that got together, and Ron says, I got one more shot. Whatever we present on his 15th and final year, this is it. Because then he goes to a senior committee, it's more difficult. So I worked with a few other players and stat people and stuff, and we put together stuff. And then when Ron gave his presentation, like, Ron, you've been saying the same thing for 14 years. What's all this stuff? And he said, well, one of them is this Bob the Stat Man that come up with all these different things. Third down, he did this, and he blocked this, and he was double teamed in this. And we put together a more complete analysis of his bio. And yeah, it makes a lot of sense. It helped that the Patriots were in the Super Bowl and all that stuff. But pretty emotional moment for Andre Tippett and for all of us that were part of that team.
that is terrific. You're kind of like the special player here for a lot of these guys. Do you do this just with football, or have you entered into like other sports doing the same thing?
This is over 20,000 hours of research to put
Wow.
both books together. So yeah, I've been pretty much concentrating on, there's 1,268 players in that book, and then a bunch of top 10 lists, like you mentioned, and all these obscure little stats. So it really started that some of the stuff in this book is actually in the Patriots Hall of Fame in an all-time interactive display on the third floor of the Patriots Hall of Fame. So over the last 3 years, we just finished that project, and they said, geez, you got all this stuff, why don't you do a book? A few months later, we put a book out with what you can see at the Patriots Hall of Fame now.
So what was the best part of doing the research for this? Any interesting stories?
I think just meeting the people and getting reactions, like, many times that, in the 70s and 80s and 90s, you went to see the other team play. You didn't really go to see the Patriots, So you kind of expected if they had a touchdown, you look for the flag and say, oh, there's a flag, it's coming back, they screwed up. But, you wanted to see Joe Namath, or you wanted to see Montana or the other teams, and 20,000 people there. And if they won, it was great. But if you didn't, hey, you got a chance to see a star because they weren't on TV half the time.
Uh-huh. So it sounds like you've had quite a bit of interaction with various Patriots players. Any real memorable moments that you can think of?
Yeah, I mean, for 13 years, I actually worked in the Patriots press room for their home game. So I had access to a lot of different players. But my first game I went to, we lost 44-16. I was at Fenway Park, and I met Gino Cappelletti and after the game. But there was another guy, Bobby Leo, who was the local Boston guy, and that was his claim to fame. He had 3 games But in that game, he had like a 40-yard punt return, and he caught a touchdown pass, and that was it. It was like his whole career. And many years later, I actually interviewed him, and he talked about that game. And then probably 5 years goes by, and I actually saw him in the bank. And I said, Bobby, how you doing? He says, you know that video you did of a little about my highlights? He says, I was in the hospital, and I was in really bad shape, and I didn't really want to do the exercising and the physical therapy. And the nurses saw that YouTube video that you did, and they came into the room and said, you played for the Patriots? And he said, yeah. He said, you better get up. And he said, it inspired me to get up because they all thought that I was a big superstar. I only had one big game, but your video really saved my life. And he said, I got up and I started doing the exercises. They like, if you're a Patriot, you get out of that bed. And they started saying all that stuff. And I've seen him since then. And he says, I'm doing great. He says, but, you know, I'm 75 years old. I figured that was it. But they revived me, and that inspired me to keep going, and he's doing well. So
That's terrific. What a great what a great thing to be doing on the side. I know I met you through your job with an insurance company and working with small businesses. But yeah, you never know when you start to talk to people a little bit more and get to know them. They always have another story and a whole nother life outside of how you know them. And it's great. We learned that about Eli too in his activities and his background. But this book is Relive Patriot History, and it's just out now with the author Bob Heidelberg, and it's really just fascinating. You know, you and I were talking about this book a while back, and I said, you know, there's a local Brocktonian, Brent Warren, who you know, was trying out for the Patriots. I said, how long did you have to be a Patriot in order to qualify for the book? And I think you told me what?
you had to actually play in a regular season game.
Okay.
So if you made it on the practice squad, sorry, you know, I mean, it's out there, but to make it in my book, you had to actually play in at least one regular season or one playoff game. There was one guy that played in 2 playoff games and never played any regular season games, but yeah, you actually get it on the field. And there's hundreds of players that were on the practice squad, especially a lot of local guys back in the 60s and 70s. And, but to make it in my book, and it's on Amazon, and you know, if anyone wants a autographed copy, even though we probably won't get it for Christmas, you know, let me know and we can hook it up. Because I'm local.
Thanks so much for being with us and lightening our load to you know, as we lead into the holidays. We send a thank you note out to the 1,000 or so people who have been on these calls since the beginning, and we will include your link to your book, and it just makes for an interesting read and a great present, obviously, this time of year. So thank you for being with
You're
us.
acknowledged in the acknowledgement section because you've been a big supporter of what I've been doing for probably over 10 years now, so I appreciate that. And just one little tidbit, I was actually born in Brockton Hospital, so I'm born a Brockton guy all the way through here. So
We say all roads lead to Brockton. It's amazing how many people know somebody or related to somebody or worked, you know, for Brockton Company. So that's great to hear. I didn't know that. That's fantastic.
Well, thanks very much, Chris.
Thank you. I want to thank all of you for being with us. I know we're coming up on the hour here. We try to start on time and end on time. So, but thank you so much. We hope to be in touch with you possibly tonight or over the weekend to see what is in this new package and to arrange a time. And we're looking at a 2 o'clock time frame because it's consistent with what we've been doing, possibly on Monday, Tuesday, or Wednesday. So please, Eli, let us know when you might be available, and we'll kind of build it around you, since this is a federal program that we're talking about. And I do see there's a couple other chat. Hopefully we'll be able to, yep, this is most just information, no questions that I see. So thank you all. Have a wonderful weekend. Enjoy yourselves, and we'll look forward to seeing you next week. We'll have a bunch of new information for small businesses in the region. Thank you so much. Have a great weekend.
Thank you, Chris.